Yes, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us on our topic today. I'm glad that we're here now. We're gonna before we get started, we're gonna see, can everyone hear me? Everyone,
Yes.
Yes.
brilliant. Thank you. Yeah. So we're gonna go into biomechanics, and we're gonna explore the forces, the energies that are all connected to the biomechanics of the human body in relation to movement, activity, in relation to nature itself. We're going to try and connect all this stuff together. And we're going to bring it all the way back into Tai Chi at the end. And we're going to take all these different forces that we were going to learn about, the different laws that are in existence. And then we're going to try and understand this in a Tai Chi concept when we're bringing it all together. The fundamental difference is with biomechanics is that it operates from bone, muscle, interaction, tendons, levers, but the whole thing come together in one system. And this is what we're going to explore. The fact that everything really does come and is utilized from one system, even though we can independently look at all these different areas. This is why we are specialists in all these different departments, but it's to bring everything together. So before we go into that though, and explore our topic today, our presentation, if there's any questions in relation to biomechanics or the body or a profound realization, anything related to what I've just mentioned there. Now, and sometimes questions are interesting because it gives clarity, and it doesn't even have to be biomechanical. It doesn't have to be biomechanical. It could be anything that comes to your mind. Let's give that a few moments, and you can come up. You can raise the hand on the Zoom there, and then we can answer that question at any time as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So, for example, does anyone know? We can write in the chat. Does anyone know what we mean by biomechanics?
No, I don't know.
Yeah. What
I'm
about
thinking
what about just simply mechanics then?
the internal movement of our body.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That is because even with biomechanics is split into um, kinematics and kinetics. And when we're looking at that, we're looking at, again, forces and we're looking at, movement. So you're very correct in that. And then with, if we had to separate the words, what about just mechanics? Like, can we give any examples in real life what mechanics might involve?
The movements of our joints and limbs and the muscles, how they interact with the nervous system, and it's a lot, I think.
Yeah, yeah. No,
That's correct.
Like having all these parts and the mechanics just keep everything together. They're all interrelated, but some parts don't realize they're interrelated with other parts. Well, some parts could be related just together, and other parts within that are related to other parts, but the other parts don't know they're interrelated. Sorry, if that makes sense.
It makes sense from that sounds paradoxical. It makes sense from a Tai Chi point of view.
Okay.
No, but it's true. It's like how you described.
Yeah, it's like an unknown of the workings of a body. I have a friend who's an engineer who's done engineering computers. And whenever he's ill, he goes to a doctor and he says, right, this is my machine, now my body. And you're this, what is it going to do to the machine? So everything is he's thinking of his body as a machine the whole time, which doctors, I think, find it very difficult to comprehend. That there's no respect for the body if all you're looking at it as a machine.
Ultimately, a
Yeah.
biological
Hmm.
And that's the interesting thing about biomechanics is because there is a saying where they say even in, my profession as a physiotherapist, they say engineers make really good physiotherapists. And
one.
I've known some that's transitioned.
Sorry, they make good what, Crystal?
Therapists, whether that's physiotherapist, osteopath, but engineers uh, do make very good physios and osteopaths because they're applying that same principles of mechanics, but they're just applying it to the body. So biomechanics is essentially the mechanics of the body, and with mechanics, there's certain rules and things that govern them, which I'm going to go into, which you can cross parallel them into the body. So yeah, what I'm going to do now, I'm going to start off. Yeah, I'm going to start off with presentation. Um, there's a few slides, and really, it's not, I didn't design the slides to be very wordy because what I want is I want us to have a think about it and I want us to have get a real life understanding about it. Because by getting a real life practical understanding, then it will make us really mindful of how actually biomechanics is really everything around us. And when learning about the body and when learning about, that's what I love about learning about the body is we can always, we always have an example. We don't have to search really far outside of ourselves to learn these principles because everyone has a body. And by having a body, we can literally learn, understand, and educate ourselves about the forces around us and how it interplays. So like that saying, as above so below, what we see, for example, if we're even looking at a bridge and how a bridge is able to take load and how a bridge has to be designed in a certain way to basically withstand a mechanical stress, our bodies are doing the same thing when we're, taking a load or running or doing something. And we really get to, it's actually nice that we're talking about biomechanics and we're looking at Tai Chi, is because Tai Chi actually is, just because of its inwardness and its self-reflective nature and its sensory nature, it gives us the opportunity to really not just understand forces that we are well aware of, but it also gives us a chance to really understand some of these unknown forces. So what I'll do, I'll start and I'm just gonna share my screen. So yeah, what we'll do, so I'm going to talk about what we know as Newton's three laws. I'm going to do a bit of an explanation on force, And then what we're going to do, we're going to explore, and we might actually leave this right at the end after Who's spoken about um, Tai Chi and biomechanics from more of a Tai Chi sensei perspective. I'm tackling it more from a person who's experienced in Tai Chi, but also kind of from a biomechanical kind of Western approach to how we would tackle, so that when we merge the two together, everyone is able to balance both hemispheres of the brain and get a better understanding. Yeah. So, all right. So we've got the first law, and the first law is basically the law of inertia, which states that something will remain at rest or in motion until a force is acted upon it. So when we're looking at something, that can be something at rest, so that can be something very still. We can think of even, let's just say a tree. A tree, its leaves, its branches will stay still if nothing interferes with that tree. But when something is acted upon it, which is a force, then it will either change its direction, or if it's static, it might move. Or if it's moving, it might stop or change its direction. So when we're looking at, for those that practice Tai Chi, we're looking at, let's say, something like the Wu Ji stance, that, one will remain still, or let's just say, yes, say if we was going into um, something like even pushing hands, and that's before we start pushing hands. Let's just say everyone, we're connected to our opponent, relatively, we will stay still until either we apply a force from within us to move the opponent, or the opponent applies a force within them to move us. So it makes you think about, okay, so then what is force? What is this thing that we call force? Most of us might think of force as, we might think of Star Wars and saying the force is within us, or the force is in you, but they're all examples of force, but there's different aspects of force, which I'm going to talk about. So, basically, when we're looking at the raw definition of the word force, we are looking at, it's basically something that can change the motion of an object. Yeah, that's a nice simple definition. So we understand also that there are different type of forces. We might have forces that are seen, and the forces that are seen might be something like, again, using the example of pushing hands, our opponent moving. So we know where that force is coming from. We know that force is generated by the muscles and the tendons and the bone structures of our opponent. But then we've also got some hidden forces, and when we're looking at some of the hidden forces, we might be thinking of something like this chi energy that one possesses, or that life force energy within us. And when we're looking at force, we're either getting not just seen and hidden forces, but also known forces. Because we can get forces that are hidden, such as gravity. We can't necessarily, well, we can see gravity, but at the same time, we can't see gravity. We see more the effect of gravity, you know. So when we're looking at something like gravity, it's hidden but known. when we're looking at the force of wind, unless it's knocking down buildings, which becomes more obvious, if we're in a nice, still, quiet environment, we might easily forget that the force of wind is around us until that gentle leaf might blow. And then in regards to Tai Chi, we can get forces of pushing and pulling, but as Sahu might go into, there's other forces. So when we're doing things like the 8 powers and we're applying the force of Jai or all these other different forces, the force of Li and Loi, there's all these different forces, which is also a description of the direction that that force might be coming from. But essentially, they're kind of birthed from the forces of pushing and pulling. And then we've got other forces. We've got like the force of nature. Forces of nature including things like gravity. Then we've got, the electromagnetic forces. Then we've got things like nuclear forces and, forces that are holding atoms in place. These are forces that are hidden, but these are forces that, we have instruments that can measure. But then there's forces that we can see, forces we can't see, forces that we can't see but that we can measure. But then there's forces that we can't see and forces that we can't measure. And that's like the unknown within the unknown, or the forces that we might see in the ancient text that we haven't become aware of in our, daily waking state. So when we're looking at inertia, we can even look at, things like, what's that force within us that might drive us to do something? So there's all these other psychological forces. So, when we're looking at force, it's just realizing that there's so many different aspects of it, and there's so many different forms of them. So let's see. All right. So if we go back to go forward, and minimize that. So we go into the second law, and the second law is force equals mass times acceleration. Yeah, and I created this image, and it was interesting because of the prompt I put, and it just automatically gave Usain Bolt's dreadlocks. So I think that was something that the computer obviously saw that Usain Bolt was a faster person and just gave him dreadlocks, not to copyright his likeness or something. But okay, so we've got force equals mass times acceleration. And oh yeah, so let's go back. So we've got this something called force. And then we've got mass and acceleration. So what we've got here, mass we're looking at, it's just what we're made of. So if we're made of a lot of substances or a lot of atoms, or if we've got more of ourselves, so a bigger person in a physical sense has more of themselves than someone who is much smaller. And we can see that this car would have a higher mass than a person. It's much heavier, there's more to it, it's larger and everything. So, and we can understand this in real time. It would not be nice if someone like Usain Bolt ran into you, but we've seen he has where there was a video of him running into a flower girl during one of the Olympics. And however, because he's got less of a mass, he was able to stop himself in time. and actually catch the girl so she didn't fall. But now, if that was the same car hurtling towards that girl, she would have got, hit and more than likely would have flown a few meters into the sky and everything. So we know that force is mass and acceleration, even by the way of the impact it can have. Think of a car crash and think of people, a runner running into something. There's two different forces at hand. One force is, you know, mostly it can be fatal. The other one, a person running into you, is, very unlikely to be fatal. So when we're looking at this in the Tai Chi sense, because what's interesting is the more you go into physics, you look at things like you go, what has why is acceleration so important? And I'm going to put up this slide as I'm talking about it. Why is acceleration so important? Because we know, by the laws of biomechanics, and we're talking about the ones that we are very aware of, in no doubt do I ever at any point believe that we know everything that there is to know. And we might in the future become aware of all these other aspects of force which explains things, that we probably didn't comprehend before. Like, for example, a mother lifting up a car of because her child is trapped underneath the car. This is something that's been well known. So it almost makes you wonder what other forces are at play. Because if we have to explain it in a logical sense or a biomechanical sense from what we're aware of, a lot of the time we will think, well, that shouldn't be possible, But taking eyes onto this picture, and again thinking of force equals mass times acceleration. Now, when we're looking at acceleration and speed are not the same thing. Speed is about how fast something is moving, but acceleration, which I think, oh, apologies, I've gone too far forward, is different. So I hope you can see this diagram below, but acceleration is how quickly something moves. And usually we measure acceleration by meters per second squared. And what we can see is, we can see that in 1 second, this car has only moved 3 meters. So it's accelerating, but it's not accelerating very quick at all. But now we can see in that in 1 second that this car has moved 6 meters. So we can see that it's accelerated faster, it's traveling faster through a given time. But here we've got this car traveling 9 meters in 1 second. So we know it's accelerating even quicker. Whereas if we just looked at speed, speed will be moving in a constant motion. So if this diagram was to represent speed, we would say that square would repeat itself here, repeat itself there. We'll see that square 3 times or 4 times, but it will be moving at the same speed. What makes acceleration is actually how quickly and the faster an object can move within the same time frame, then that is what is accelerating. And if we go back to the image with Usain Bolt's the dreadlock version, we would see that actually the acceleration is how quick the mark and how that speed is constantly being increased. And the reason why that's important to know is if we go back to this diagram, the way that this older, frailer lady as depicted is going to beat this bigger gentleman is not by using the same force or the same speed. Because if they're using the same speed, then it's very likely that he will be able to detect that and cancel out her speed because she's moving at that same motion. But what's going to make that different is her acceleration and the velocity, you know. So the velocity is different from speed because speed is just about, it's on a scale. It's just how quickly something is moving. But velocity is how quick something is moving in a direction. So if we've got this arm moving downwards quickly, then that's velocity, which is more applicable to our limbs because whatever we're moving fast is going to move in a specific direction. Yeah. So in this 3D world, it's all about, I'm going to use interchangeably velocity and speed, but we're more talking about the correct definition is the velocity, which is basically how quickly something is moving over in a direction. So if, for example, she detects for a split moment an area where he's more unbalanced and she utilizes that in a very quick motion, then that's how she is going to be able to overpower. That's how she's going to generate a greater force, and that's how she can defeat a much larger opponent. And that's the beauty of Tai Chi. Because for those of us who was at the pushing hands contest, one of the things I learned from my first time where I was not successful, but this time, winning 2 gold medals, was actually that velocity, that speed, that change in direction component of it, which, definitely helped me to get those gold medals. So this is where a smaller opponent can defeat a much larger opponent. Yeah. So we've talked about going back Newton's first law. Nothing moves. Things will stay stationary or will move at a constant speed unless a force is acted upon it. So again, going back to Newton's first law, there's not going to be no movement if they're not making contact with each other or applying a force on one another. Yeah. So then the second law talking about force, force is actually the speed or the velocity of the movement and times in the acceleration, how quickly one moves. And that's basically what's the second law, and that's how it's applicable in the Tai Chi sense. But then when we go to the third law, for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. This is also talking about, how we can become very stationary in our postures. Or this is how, when we're moving, it kind of makes us more mindful how we can use other things or other masses to counteract. So, for example, by that law, if we look at this guy standing in a wide stance, we can see that, let's just say this guy weighs 80 kilograms. So as 80 kilograms of his body is going down into the ground, there's an equal and opposite 80 kilograms pushing back up. If that was not the case, let's just say if the floor or the surface he was on was only weighing something like 60 kilograms, we'll get 20 kilograms of force more pressing down, which might actually, well, according to the laws of equal and opposite reaction, would destroy, and um, this man will basically break the structure that he's standing on. Yeah. Um, and when we're aware of these things, we can be really aware of our posture, and in a little bit of an offshoot, we can become more aware of pressure, you know. And when we're looking at, again, things like, when we're doing the Tai Chi and we're looking at someone, let's just say if he was in the proper stance and he was balancing more on his toes, eventually you get more force coming down. You still get the 80 kilograms coming down. You'll still get the 80 kilograms balancing the force coming up. But then if that's applied to a smaller area, that can result in injury, you know. So forces will always try and balance themselves out. When we go into the example of pushing hands, um, we can get someone who equal opponents who are applying the same force, and if they are applying exactly the same force, we will get no movement at all. However, again, if someone who is stronger than one opponent, you still are going to get an equal and opposite reaction. So let me explain here. So if we had this lady pushing this bigger guy, let's say she pushes him 2 steps backwards. Let's imagine that she's applied maybe 20 kilograms of force to this man that set him off balance. The force will balance itself by him moving. Yeah? Because if we got her, it's one of those things in nature. When we're looking at again, the laws of Tahuti, as above, so below, uh, um, as within, so without, or we're looking at the yin and the yang, and we're looking at the universe is always going to make balance in one way or another. If she pushes him 20 kilograms and he moves 2 steps, him moving 2 steps is how the forces balance each other. Even if this woman was to apply a little bit more force and push him where he falls on the floor, the universe will still balance it by making him fall on the floor because she's applying more force, so it's got to come back as an equal and opposite. Now, let's say this guy did not move and this guy was absolutely solid, but she applied a force greater than what he was able to withstand. If she done that and he stays solid, but he could not withstand that force, the force will still try and balance itself, even whether he's moved or not. But that force might balance itself with him maybe breaking an arm in the process. So no matter what, you know, the universe and things will always find a way to balance itself. Now, let's just say we've also got another scenario where she's applied so much force, but he's truly remained static. But then she will be the one that might sustain a fracture, maybe in a vertebra, because although she's applied the force in that direction, and there's no budge here whatsoever in any shape or form, and it was a powerful force, then that force is going to go back in this equal and opposite direction, which might be transmuted through her, which will cause a problem. So that's basically just to get everyone thinking about a bit of the biomechanics. We'll go into the who's slide, and then what we'll do at the end, we'll have a discussion on the Wu Chi stance, and then we'll have a look at other forces that can come into play, and leave the floor open for further um, further exploration. But yeah, no, I hope that's made sense so far. All right. Oh, let's see what's
Yes,
happening.
thank you, Kristos. Yeah, man, that was very interesting. That was a nice explanation of the biomechanics, the laws, the fundamental laws, the three of them. Bringing those three in. What will be really interesting as well when I go through the slides, if we're able to remember these three laws and see where they pop up, because they're quite constant. They're quite constant. Any questions there or any queries before we go into the my set of slides there? Because that's very interesting what you were suggesting there. A lot of thoughts come up. Or is everyone looking to save those for the end? Yeah, I think everyone save that for the end. I want to go into, we always get a bit more mystical or go into the alchemy and stuff. So we're just going to talk about biomechanics from you could say metaphysical. You can say this. Well, we're just going to look at it from more of the mystical aspect of it and how all these things to come together. But we're also going to briefly look at the separation or the mechanisms independently. But we still need to bring these mechanisms back together. And because we understand a little bit better the different type of forces, we have an appreciation of mass and how this with velocity creates force. We have a better appreciation. And as a result of this, as we begin our presentation, we can enter into, for us in Tai Chi, what we're trying to really appreciate, what we're trying to achieve. This is found in the Tai Chi discourse. The root is in the feet. The discharge is done by the legs. The controlling power is in the waist, and the appearance is in the hands and the feet. So when we're generating force to achieve something, we're not using levers in an independent manner. We're actually using whole body biomechanics to achieve this. From the feet, and just as we understand a little bit better now, that depending upon your weight, how much force is being through pressure given to earth, and that force being driven up through your body, and you utilizing that force through the legs itself, that being controlled through the waist. And we're going to go into that. And that's all rotational power. And that slight deviation of rotation with a little bit of velocity makes a huge impact into the emptiness or into a vulnerable space. And this is mainly we're talking about from a martial point of view, when we're thinking of it in this way. But this can also be done in any activity. It just looked like you lifted something up because of your hands. Excuse me. It just looked like you picked up something from the side with your fingers and your arms, your shoulder done the activity, which would suggest a second class type lever that's going on here. But that never happened. It was like a whole body activity from the floor. When we can function this way in our everyday activity, and then we can also interact with somebody else in the same manner here from using whole body dynamics, then we're integrated. And I think this is what we're trying to achieve. All this comes from the legs, the foundation of this whole process. And as we are aware now, this is earth pressure, which is referred to as gravity. Try not to call it gravity too often. And it's only because of the way gravity is described is why I have my own personal issues with gravity. So I'm happy to call it pressure. Yeah, and there's layers of pressure, and them different layers can they can break apart, which allows for something to fall through the layers of the field, as opposed to gravity pulling something down to the center. And that would be your mass. We're not going to go too deep into that stuff there, because we're here right now looking to Tai Chi. So with the lower limb, we have our absorption, which is really important. And the absorption, again, may look like it's coming from the arms, but it's going through the body, where you are able to redirect or transform a force. And again, don't be misled thinking that this is just when you're, let's say, in Tai Chi sense, doing pushing hands, while you're doing some kind of martial arts. You could be cooking food at the stove, you could be washing up. It's the same way. The way in which you move dynamically, where you're transforming force from one state to another. And then you can multitask and move with a rhythmic flow. So it is felt. It is felt in pushing hands to appreciate the feeling that when you do this in real life. And that is the thing. It's hard to determine the feeling if you've never experienced the quality properly. So the main areas we're going to look at when we're reviewing this is the feet, the knees, and the hips, which control all this other force that we're referring to, which express itself through the back, through the shoulders, through the hands, eventually. And each of these have energetic connections, and these are all areas that are really important to us to focus upon. So before we go into that though, I just would like to remind everybody about biotensegrity. You know, I'm like big on biotensegrity, which is really talking about tension and compression. And this is all about generating force, which allows you to generate power. But from a Tai Chi perspective, biomechanics, again, isn't an independent system. It's a system that is unified. And this is tensegrity as a concept is taken from architecture, so engineering. And from this engineering concept of tensegrity, and that was observed through being able to make a bridge that is on suspension over a long distance and is able to evenly balance the weight from one side of the bridge to the other, where it's not tipping. There are many structures that are like domes, like a greenhouse that has a dome, and you see these hexagon patterns or shapes of glass around it. This is following a tensegrity pattern, that dome. So this is all archaeology, this is all coming from architecture, engineering. We apply that architecture, engineering, to the human body. And we end up with biotensegrity, which is the same thing, the ability for the body to evenly distribute force throughout the body. So when force is created, it spreads through, whether it's force from the hand. I only say it this way because it's point of contact, the elbow, the shoulders, but the force is being generated from the feet, being released through the rest of the body. Or it can be said, whatever point is fixed on the earth or to the floor or to a chair. So if you're sitting down, that becomes the point of contact with the earth or with the ground energy. And you issue that force from a seated space as if it's your feet. The main thing though, with biomechanics, as we understand these laws, is that these laws are expressed using a lever system. And there are three main categories of levers that are utilized in understanding human biomechanics. Well, what we're going to do, we're going to put those main three levers that are found in engineering, in mechanics. And we're going to put those three levers into the biotensegrity model. So we're going to expand our awareness of how these particular levers work in a moment. So as we go into a little bit more detail with the biotensegrity model, bones, they float. So it's not a hinge or it's not stuck. I suppose this again is mechanics when we're looking at how things are connected together. But in a human body, things are actually moving and floating. The reaction to the earth or the ground itself is distributed, which is for our physical form, it prevents so much injury. The fact that force can be distributed through the body, a thing that's happening, and we are benefiting from it, and we don't even appreciate that default when you become aware, and we can actually operate from that state more frequently. The sharing reaction with the earth, with our lever one activity and pushing off, or the friction is dissipates, and there's less compression. So if we go into these levers that we have biomechanically, this is what is called a first lever, where the fulcrum is in the center. In this case, it's the spine. The muscles in the back of the head, as it pulls down. This is the muscle, the activity, the work that's being done. And it lifts, it raises the head. In a class 2, we're going to see this a lot, but the fulcrum in this case is the ball of the foot or the toes. The weight's in the center because it's the body mass and the rest of the torso, most of the body. And the area that's doing that work, in this case, is the calf, soleus gastrocnemius, but this would be called a second class because the fulcrum is at the end. And fulcrum become really important in our Tai Chi reality. And in this one here, the fulcrum is also at the end, but in this case, the weight is at the end. And in the middle is where the work is generated in order to lift the weight. So these are the basic 3 levers that we have in the body. And generally, like the hip is a class 3 lever, the way in which it operates. Same as a knee. It's like generally there's a lot of third class if you're going to be dividing stuff up, but nothing really works this way because you're going to do that bicep curl, and depend upon the strength of that bicep and the weight of the object, it determines how much your back's getting involved into this. And then from that, if you're doing it correctly, you will never lift it up from your bicep. You'll be lifting that up from your core. So you'll be contracting your center. So that from your center all the way up to your bicep, that's a lot of muscular activity going on. So it's not really independent. But as we are aware now, we're trying to bring all that together. Those 3 levers from a biomechanical point of view, we bring into biotensegrity. Biotensegrity basically is the compression and the tension through the body. Yeah. How this works for us though, we have during this process what we call torque. And in this is the rotational movement of something around its axis. So we are constantly doing a rotational activity, this spiral force, which I will go through briefly in a moment, a little bit more. But I would like to touch a little bit more about torque from an internal point of view. So when we have 2, 3 different areas of the body connected together or fixed. Fixed. From this, we can create an internal activity, which is essential for further development. The fixation take place, let's say, because we don't need all these places fixed in order to create an internal stretch. So, but we do require more than 2 locations active in order to create this. The more refined the body becomes, then we can bring it down to 2. The more gross the body is, then we require more points of contact internally to create the stretch. So let's say the foot, the knee, the hip. Those 3 points there, from a rotational point of view, the spine rotating would create this internal stretch in the torso area. This is what we refer to as an internal stretch. This is why, let's say we are doing this movement that you can see the skeleton doing, and you are turning to the left here. It's all about how that knee is fixed, determines how much force transfers over to the hips and how much power is released through the arms. And all of that was created through the talk itself. And as was described really well between the two, the elder and the young man there, if this can be done with the correct velocity, this rotational force, then we can override another system very easy. And it can manifest and look different from being from a hop, a bounce, a jump, drop to the floor, to an injury. All of that is because that rotational, and if it's not able to counteract, which we're going to show in a second, then it's really challenging. So all this circular force creates what we call eventually torsion. We just come from torque. Yeah. And now we end up with some torsion. But generally, we are under some tension. We got biotensegrity, which is compression and tension. But if we can create torque, we can create torsion. Between these forces here is the force that we're utilizing. And even, because when I describe this, it always sounds to me, I'm describing a martial application or in a fighting context. But this is the same thing if we're going on tiptoe or if we're bouncing, because the muscles like tibia and teres, like the muscle that comes at the front of the shin, on the outside of the shin, that's like a muscle that does a slight rotation in itself. These tissues here, as they spiral, as you can see on the other side, the spiral line in functional anatomy, where different muscles connect together through fascia and tendons and connective tissue. All these connected together.
Tibialis anterior, you were
Yeah, did I say tibulara or something?
tibialis anterior.
Yeah. Yeah, everyone got that one there. We just say Latin words really bad sometimes. But that is the shin muscle. And that muscle there, it enters like the solar plexus, plantar fascia. I feel like you need to correct me with that one as well. The plantar fascia.
Yeah. So the tibialis anterior running at the front of the shin, and then you've got the calf, the gastrocnemius, which is the calf, and then the soleus connecting together, going down the back of the leg, making the Achilles tendon, and then they're all going round to the bottom of the foot, making up the plantar fascia, and then kind of reconnecting round the back, the front of the foot, up the tibialis anterior.
All spiral, all spiraling, all
Mhm.
spiraling, all torsion,
Mm.
going back, all coming from torque, going back, all coming from rotation, coming back. It's all circles. So briefly, we're just gonna remind ourselves of these special points, which bubbling well, or this first kidney point. This point here, what we can see, the same area where we'll have our plantar fascia, the same segment, or say, how would you describe that, Kristos, if you were to locate that on yourself?
Yeah, so all of where you see the K2, that's corresponding to just in front where the big toe is. That's the first metatarsal, but then that K2 is in between the second and the third metatarsal, just kind of a little bit above what we would basically call. I know with anatomy, there's so many ways you can describe it, so it gets a little bit confusing at times.
Isn't
But I
it?
would just call it around, the ball of the foot,
Just
that
beneath,
K11.
just beneath the ball of the foot, in the center.
Mhm.
Well, this is our bubbling well, or bubbling spring, which is a energetic point connected to our meridians, the energy flow. But when we're talking about force transmission from standing to moving, whether it's stepping or running, we have these 3 points that are really important when we're distributing weight. And also when we're walking. I've been analyzing walking a lot recently. And between a heel strike, a mid strike, and a metatarsal, let's say a metatarsal strike, it's really hard in fixed shoes to achieve a clarity of how you're stepping to produce power. If you're stepping to produce power, then you're really stepping on the front of your foot. So you're aiming through a mid strike to the front of the foot, and the heel doesn't really touch down. If you're taking it a little bit further, then you're really on the ball of your foot where the metatarsals are, and you're just walking on that area there. Which, again, if you haven't got the strength in your foot, that's going to cause an issue, whether it's in your Achilles tendon or in your plantar fascia. So all this requires training, but this allows us to absorb force, this plantar fascia, and to distribute our weight evenly is important. So we spend a lot of time talking of torque and torsion when we're grounding or rooting, but we don't use this language. We talk of placing the big toe down, spreading the toes, having this awareness of from the big toe, the ball of the foot, and the toes being spread. From there to the heel of the foot. Should we have 2 feet and we're standing, we envision that the heels come together. So as we're pressing down the big toe and the heels come together, we're activating the plantar fascia. But as this takes place, the knees have an outward rotation. We fix that by a pelvic tilt, forward pelvic tilt, where it helps to bring that into alignment. Very important process between the feet and our practice. So then that force is sent up the legs Yeah? You see how we have this muscle there? All these muscles here in the lower leg. Sending this information up to the hip area. This bridge here, or the knee itself, is so important for our stability and the ability to transmit this force from the earth, from the floor, through the legs, up to the hips. So it's all about alignment of knee. In this case, we spend so much time softening up the patella, the side of the knee, the back of the knee, the attachment of the hamstrings going into the back of the knee. And all of this is ultimately, yes, circulation, it's lymphatic drainage, it's all that wonderful stuff, but ultimately, from a health point of view, and also from a Tai Chi point of view, it's all about force. The greater the range, the more flexible the knees, the more supple they are, the better they're able to transmit force from the earth through the body. You walk, and you're not going to feel the knees paining because the force is getting stuck in the knee because it's blocked. It's not able to send the information through the knee, past the thigh, into the hip, up the spine. So we end up causing more damage over time or stiffness. So the knee in this whole process, essential. And as we go further up into the hip area, which is also directing the hip, the pelvis, the waist, directing this earth force energy of your own weight and mass. As you utilize it, depending upon your own velocity, if you can maintain it, that is advanced stuff going on there. So in order to maintain that stuff, we spend a lot of time strengthening pelvic floor and the core area and connecting to Dantian. Dantian itself come like the central engine, the central hub for all this biomechanics to function. We just using the own physical weight, redirecting it internally and redirecting it. And all this starts from rooting and grounding and finding your center. This is where you can find where there are weaknesses, where there are areas in the body that are blocked, where you feel pain, tension. It's in a static posture. It's Wu Chi that we're going to discuss afterwards. But this is a posture to remember for later on. But the reason why the slide is here is for the idea of rooting. So this is where it all comes from, to be rooted. If one is not rooted, then we're unable to achieve any of this, because then it will come from a lever or from an independent body part. So the process starts here in this practice, and this is the beginning of Tai Chi, and this is why we referring to all these meridian channels that are in the legs. The 12 channels are the main ones, but then we have the extraordinary vessels there's 4 of them, which are the main, like we've got the heel thrusting meridian, which is to generate like calf power that goes through the body, or your calf strength. And from this internal pressure that's created through alignment of the feet, if we are in a static posture, alignment of the knees and the hips, and the whole body's central alignment. This is the activity that we're going to again go through a bit deeper in a few moments. But during this process here, it's all about energy flow and trying to find your center. If you're more advanced, it is all about trying to connect your breath with your perineum, the tip of your tongue, roof of the mouth. Once you've got through that, you go further into Wu Wei, or into no mind, or into being present but not present. Releasing all tension in the body. So that's what Kristos was talking about. All this lovely stuff here, ultimately, does this pause? Let me just play a little bit of this. So I'm just going to talk through some of this. So when we're pushing hands and we're trying to utilize this ground force power, because a lot of these videos, sorry, the clips are slowed down so we can actually see what's going on, because the velocity is so quick. When things happen, it happens really fast, and it's just hard to see what just took place. If you can remain rooted and grounded during the activity and use your rotational power, this is the essence of Tai Chi biomechanics. To find your center and to remain there. This is our Kristos in his first round of pushing hands, fixed step. And there are different weight categories. So fortunately, you are against somebody who's your own weight. So then you can actually test yourself without having additional stress. We're just going to observe a few more moments. For those of us that have never observed moving step as well, where we move, and we are still using the mechanics of the body, but in this case, it's moving. Fixed step is far more challenging because if you ain't got good balance and good stability, it's easy for you to lose your balance. So with our pushing hand, it's all about generating this, what we call trained force through the mechanics of our body, which is called Farjin. And Farjin is this explosive power that we see being displayed by Kristos. We can say that was a bit of muscle power there, but it's all right.
Yeah.
Wonderful, wonderful, Alan. When you see Alan, see it there? Neutralizing the force and then allowing the person to fall.
Brilliant.
So this is how it works when you start to understand the body. Let's move on. Because I wanted just to, because force generation from the lower part of the body, transmitted through the body. Let me actually play this, because I think he might say it better than me. Wait a minute. It's not the way, because you got to demonstrate at no weight, but we're going to do the wait a minute. Right, so we don't want to do a circle like this, isn't it? Yeah? Or a circle like this. Why don't we want to do the circle like this?
That's only engaging your arm. Tai Chi, the whole body.
Right, so when we do our circle, we want our whole circle to coordinate with the hip, torso reaching up, turning, then lowering. Whole body activity. And then take the up direction. So we're coming around. Ultimately, if we're training this, right, so do the same, then we require a force to resist in order for us to move through these different angles, for us to integrate our whole body mechanics. And this is a process that takes a lot of time, because the arm really shouldn't be lifted from the shoulder. The arm should be lifting up through the body, through the leg. again, process that takes time to appreciate. To create a circle with one arm, the science, as RD was explaining in the beginning, the paradoxical nature of Tai Chi. To achieve something, you gotta think. When you sink to rise, you yield to control. Your structure dissolves everything that comes in.
Yeah, no, really good that presentation. And yeah, I think it's reminding me of what this Shaolin master was talking about. And what's interesting is, when you're looking at it's just from my reality, Tai Chi seems like one of the best ways to understand and learn about biomechanics,
Yeah, man.
in a body sense. When you're looking at other activities, movement, sports, I think the the things that it l- doesn't have as much as Tai Chi is the balance between the internal and the external forces. You're looking at something like sprinting, and it's still beautiful when you see, the sprinter sprint, because you're looking at, the power,
And them man, they're experts. They gotta know their stride length. They gotta know
Mm,
the number of steps before they get to whatever corner or before they get to whatever
yeah,
hurdle. There's a whole heap of counting. If they're doing a rotational thing like the hammer, they got to do 1, 2 step quick, and then they got to rotate. It's a whole heap of mathematics going
yeah,
on.
it's true. And that's even something that's, one directional in that, that aspect. But there's something beautiful about Tai Chi. But what this Shaolin master was talking about, he said we've got 4 limbs, and then we've got the one head.
Hmm,
And he was saying there's something about this book learning, which is spending hours and hours sitting down learning, where he was saying it doesn't make sense. You've only got one head, but you've got 5 limbs. So he was saying you're meant to be learning through the movement.
hmm,
And I think if we got a lot of more people, especially healthcare practitioners, because it works so hand in hand,
hmm,
doing and practicing the Tai Chi, they will understand much more about their body and the body of others. Because I was doing this, even I was doing a course on like the mobilization manipulations and stuff. And the guy actually said the best people that get it straight away are the people, martial artists,
hmm,
you know,
hmm.
because he was saying it's the same principle in how you apply forces to the body. And I've been to a few couple of teachers, and he was, yeah, definitely, you know, I learned much more from him just by his explanation.
It works both
And
ways, isn't it?
yeah, there's that biomechanical principle that he's applied in real time.
Hmm,
And that's why I would encourage people who's not doing Tai Chi, to, yeah, get into it. I think mostly everyone on the chat today is doing Tai Chi or some form of Tai Chi, but I would really encourage everyone to do it because it teaches you a different dynamics. And once you understand this dynamics, you can apply in everything. And I would even go further and encourage sports people, especially young professionals or young people who really, are trying to make it into the sporting world to
I think they
to
just don't
grasp
understand
these
the
things.
benefits, so it's hard for them to seek something that they don't see the benefit of.
Mm. Until that one person does it.
Yeah, it's true.
And then it's like a wildfire.
Wow,
Um,
that's it. Because I see while watching martial arts, I see a lot of Tai Chi principles pop up. But I think
mm,
those individuals that I see practicing that, they are like they're masters. It's not to say that
mm,
they're black belt level.
mhm,
And it's like a simple example I heard the other day. Because if someone goes to, let's say, lunge at you to grab your waist in a
mm,
martial art setting, you would usually step back and spread your legs. And then
mm,
they call that a sprawl to counterbalance the person's weight.
mhm.
You would sprawl backwards, your legs will go back and just open them wide.
Yeah,
But when
yeah.
you get to when you pass black belt, when you're master level, you don't do that. You don't sprawl. It come like those moments,
Mm,
you would use your force. You would stand firm. You would direct your force forward at a certain angle, which will be like because of the velocity of your force going forward. It don't matter the speed at which they're coming or the velocity at which they're coming because of the speed at which you've created. I love the way I iterate those two words there. It causes them just to stop suddenly. It just causes a sudden stop. You just neutralize the
mm,
force and then you can just redirect it as
mm,
opposed to sprawling, spreading. But everyone does that though. And you will see everyone doing that because everyone's still practicing beginner mentality. This is the thing
mm,
with Tai Chi biomechanics, the same thing you're saying there, because that's something that you would do in Tai Chi.
mhm,
You would neutralize the force. You wouldn't sprawl. You wouldn't
mm.
spread your legs. You know what I'm saying? You would neutralize it
Yeah,
and redirect
yeah,
it. And that's
yeah,
just
yeah,
natural. But that's something that
yeah,
may not be appreciated for people who are not in that world there in Tai Chi.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Because it's like when you go over the drills, it becomes embedded, you
Yeah.
know. It's like, you know, I've done the drill so many times where if someone came at a certain angle, it's just more of a reflex. It's a reflex in the right step because my primitive reflex has been overridden.
Hmm.
And it's hard to, you can't override it back with bad habits because it's like once you know.
Hmm.
And once you've seen that possibilities, you can't go back,
Yeah.
you know, once you see things, see it for what it is. But then also there's the general health aspect, as one gets older, the biggest cause of death for the elderly is when they've fallen and broken their hips and all these falls.
The main
And,
engine.
yeah, we're not even talking about dying from falling. We're talking about the consequence of falling, which has led to immobility or reduced mobility, which, is the best exercise after a certain age that will keep you going, keep you strong,
Hmm.
keep you climbing upstairs, that is gonna keep you alive for longer. So when I used to work in the NHS, falling is a big thing. It's one of those things directly and indirectly it leads to big problems. And if people understood this, you would see elderly people are much better focus in including Tai Chi in part of the exercise, which will make such a big difference, you
Yeah.
know.
We said for fall prevention.
Yeah,
Fall
you
prevention.
know.
But it's also good for teaching us how to fall,
Yeah,
as we call
yeah.
it, break fall. Yeah,
Mm,
because both of them are still required, isn't it? Because you may fall, but when you do fall, what are you gonna do in that moment there? It's really you only have a
mm.
few seconds, not even a few seconds, you have the 1 second of falling to make the decision. And
Yeah.
hopefully it's going to be a muscle memory. That's going to allow your body to slightly turn correctly to disperse the force. And that again is the biotensegrity, isn't it? That impact should disperse through the whole body.
Yeah.
Mechanically, the force should go through. It should ripple. It shouldn't just be the impact point is the point that feels it, which
Yeah, and that's the third law, equal and opposite reaction, you know.
yeah.
Any questions or thought?
The laws, the three laws, with a bonus of torsion and torque. Yeah, man. Yeah, we combine those five elements, and we're in a good situation. This is going to take time to combine these different elements, bringing them together. Yes,
Did
sir,
you want
Alan.
to say?
No, I want to congratulate you both for a great presentation. Some of it, I'd like, if it's possible, to look at the replay because some of it went a bit over my head. Not in the sense that I didn't understand it, but I just couldn't take it all in at the same time, you know. But yeah, wonderful presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed.
Yeah, I know it was wonderful. I think what Alan has said, I think one needs to listen to it not just once more, quite some time, and then every section you were covering, you could kind of take it as a sort of a section and just concentrate on that. There. I think I have to listen to it quite a few times to even recall some of the stuff you did. But it's that and connecting it to Tai Chi. Thank you.
Welcome.
Yeah, there was a lot of information because Kristos took it beyond biomechanics. You know what I'm saying? He took
Well,
it
I
to
think
yes, go on.
it was great to listen. Thank you for that. It's also really helpful to associate it with the Tai Chi. That was really important. So it had some relevance to my everyday life. But as Dee and Alan said, some parts I got it, some parts I would have to listen to it, and it maybe a bit more research on our own side, because sometimes listening is good, but then sometimes you have to look into things a bit deeper. And that's when the true commitment starts, isn't it? When you start researching a bit more. So thank you for that, guys.
We can hear again, can't we? Sahu, will this be put on the website?
Yeah, we'll upload this onto YouTube.
Onto YouTube, okay.
Yeah, we'll
Oh,
edit this.
that's great.
Thank you.
And give us an opportunity to explore these topics deeper in the future. If one has any questions in the future, after you go through your profound realization during practice, that's the opportunity, isn't it? It's when you're practicing that you start thinking about ground force interaction, disperse through your body, and how you're actually doing stuff.
And understanding the Wu Chi and the balancing when we are doing Wu Chi at the beginning. You see, those are the sort of things I've picked up on, and understanding how that plays a part. And so, yeah, and in all sports, you have to ground yourself. Even in Pilates yoga, you have to find some kind of happy medium before you start. But nobody understands why we're finding that happy medium and getting ourselves into that comfortable fixture. Yeah, so that yeah, very helpful.
That's brilliant.
Thank you.
I do like the way you explain that there. facilitating energetic balance, all this alignment.
Yeah, because even today when I was doing some stuff, I was really thinking about how I'm going to lift that leg up. And it's the leg that gives me issues, the feet that gives me issue on balancing, and how to do a static and remain balanced on the bad foot. Well, it's not a bad foot, it's just, discomfort. And I had to take a few seconds to get into myself and balance out, do a kind of a wu chi, even though I wasn't doing Tai Chi, and then raise the leg, and it was more comfortable because I had to find that happy medium of concentration and use my core to achieve that. So exercise and sport is not simple. People look from the outside and say, oh, that's easy to do. But the effort you have to go through sometimes just to get that comfort and that balance to prevent another injury. You have to take that few seconds out and go into your internals to think about it before you execute.
Yeah, definitely.
That you explained that, it reminded me of an experience that I had with a person who had a stroke, and I was working with him for a little while, and I think maybe a year after working with him, he said a very interesting statement to me. Like it was like a revelation to him. Said to me how he discovered a way how he can lift up his arm without using the same amount of force. Like he doesn't have to use the same amount of effort. Like he can lift his arm because the arm was seized up same way. So he could raise his arm, yeah, because he couldn't raise his arm just normally. But he was explaining to me, yeah, he found a way. And I'm like, yeah, what is this then? Because you got me here, you got me well excited. So he centered himself, he separated his feet, he stood in his center, he took a deep breath, and as he was breathing out, he started to raise his arm. And then he brought it back down. He goes, look, did you see that? Did you see what I just done? I'm like, yeah, we doing Tai Chi already. Like, I'm like, yeah, man. Like, in my brain, I'm like, obviously, but his excitement he was so amazed that he discovered it. Like no one ever knew this. That's how he explained it to me. Like, no one ever knew that if you find your center and you take a deep breath in and then out and raise your arm is lifting easier. The reason why I say that, and I think only when we're in this ease state, when injury come, illness come, or when an area doesn't function correctly, that we start to learn or we acknowledge that this centering and this breathing is fundamental to movement. It's only when we're diseased, when we're in a good functional state and it's moving through, we don't really acknowledge this. I think only elite athletes may capture this. This is what made them elite, because they capture this understanding from quite early and they're able to use that through their whole career. Where the average person doesn't see this connection, and it's only when they're sick or unwell that they see that connection there.
Yeah. Because even going back to what the Shaolin Master was saying, when you put everything together, you see that it's a different type of intelligence. We always think of intelligence as one way, the book learning, but when you're performing Tai Chi and you're learning it, you're mastering it, there's a level of intelligence that one grows into or one has or one possesses or one opens up. Just the same type of intelligence where some people are master piano players. It's all these different. So, when you see these athletes, you have to give them their dues and their props that, they're not just a bag of muscles running around. There's a. Of intelligence.
They're a finely tuned crystal.
Mm. Hmm. Yeah, and we know that the intelligence that a crystal has within it.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? We be crystalline. I know we talk all this on we say it was alchemy, yeah, and metaphysics. Really, we didn't even go deep into that.
Hmm.
But that's if we were briefly just mention that, it would be this, isn't it? That
Hmm.
every structure, every bone, every connective tissue, every fiber is a crystalline structure.
Yeah, 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 yeah. When
Everything
you
is
look at
fractal. It's fractal.
yeah, yeah. I mean, they say even being, beings of light, when you're looking at even photons and the way things project itself and
Mm,
how these almost, I would say, like prisms, how it catches light, how our body catches light and interprets it in different ways, how, you get inspiration from the sun.
mm,
There's a lot going on. All these forces, even down to the force of when Bob Marley was talking about the natural mystic flowing through the air. There's more than what meets the eye, and that's why I believe movement is so key and so critical. Even when you look at certain parts of the world where you get even the book smart, but the book smart seems to be, we're talking about like places like Asia and like that,
mm.
where, there seems to be a correlation even between having the opening of a musical ability, the tutorship in the piano learning, you know, it just shows that this whole movement thing and movement is
Essential.
critical, spiritual, and everything in necessary, for so many things. And I think, when we're looking at the biomechanics, it's looking at certain laws, you know, and understanding these laws that govern the universe. And in the understanding of the laws,
Mm.
then that's when you get a better understanding of the reality.
You just remind me of gnosis when you said all that stuff there. Because there's a part of gnosis, I don't remember the text, but it's how do you know? How do you know that the creator exists within you?
Mm.
And the response, I think it could be the Book of Thomas. Thinking about it now, I think it could be the Gospel of Thomas in the Nag Hammadi Library. Motion and rest.
Mm.
Motion and rest. When I read that, I was thinking that's very interesting.
Hey.
The same thing you've been talking about is movement, isn't it?
And the same laws.
Yeah, same laws. And they definitely were comprehend well. No, well, yes, but maybe in a different way. The laws that we went through, the three of them,
Mm.
they would have been utilizing them, definitely.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah.
Would have been the law of vibration and the law of polarity and the law of causation. I think so these laws would have been the basic laws of the three laws that we described.
Mm.
Yeah, man. Well, I think we done good. I think we've gone through a lot today with this. We're gonna have to do a round two
Mm.
in a couple months' time,
Mhm.
just to bring it all together again. The different
Yeah.
forces, how the forces interact, how they interact within us, how we can use them to our advantage.
Mm.
Yeah, man. And how we can use this in everyday life and in our practice, whether it's singular on your own or with another person.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you. I must go, Saho. Crystal, thank you very much indeed.
You're welcome.
Wonderful and
Everyone
informative.
else as well.
Thank you. And
Thank you, Sahu. Thank you, Christos.
Have a
Thank
wonderful
you, Kristos.
evening.
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kristos. Thank you, Sahu. Have a good evening, and we'll see you soon.
All right, then
Thank you.
bye
That was
everyone.
marvelous. Really, really interesting. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Bye.
Bye you all.
All right.
Okay.